Hello, Sue. I'm Jan from the upcoming. Nice to meet you. How are you today?
I'm good. It's nice to meet you as well, Jan. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for talking to me today. Firstly, I wanted to ask you who exactly are the eponymous Sea women, and can you tell us something more about them?
So, the Henyo, also known as Sea Women, are a community of women that have existed for centuries on an island called Jeju Island, which is just off the coast of South Korea. And they're famous for free diving down to the ocean's floor to harvest seafood and marine life using only their breath, and catching seafood and marine life to support their families and their communities and the island of Jeju. And so, by virtue of them doing this for centuries, they have become the breadwinners of this island. They turned this island into a semi-matriarchal society, and they at one point, I believe, were responsible for 70% of the economic revenue of Jeju Island. So they're kind of Asia's first working women and a matriarchal society that existed in a historically deeply patriarchal society.
And is it one of the main reasons why did you decide to tell their story in the first place? But also maybe did you try to preserve the memory of their tradition and history? What's your approach?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think, I first became aware of them when I was a child, and I became very fascinated with them. And the more
Mhm.
I learned about them and the influence that they had on this island of Jeju Island and in Korean history, I, of course, became very sort of admiring and inspired by their strength and their independence and their financial independence and their agency and their empowerment. So I have always wanted to portray them in a documentary to just kind of show what an incredible community of women and what an incredible history this community of women has had on Korean society. But the making of this documentary took a more urgent turn about 10
Mhm.
years ago when I was visiting Jeju Island and I was speaking with some Haenyeo. And that's when I found out that this generation of Haenyeo, who are currently, the vast majority of them are now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're all kind of grandmas. I found out that this generation of Haenyeo was likely to be the last generation of the Haenyeo. So now it's a community that's on the verge of extinction. So that really was the driving motivation behind
Mhm.
telling their story right now.
So tell me, how did you prepare for this film? How did you prepare your research? I'm also interested, how did you try to gain the trust of this community of female divers? You mentioned speaking to them, but what were your other elements of preparation and research?
Well, as I mentioned, I'd been kind of fascinated with them my whole life.
Mm.
So research wise, I'd read books and articles, read watched every news piece I could about them. So I was fairly familiar with them and their history by the time that I started going back to Jeju myself to meet them. Basically, once this movie became kind of funded and I knew that we could start production, I went down to Jeju Island with a researcher and a local producer. And the three of us met with like 15 different Haenyeo communities on the island. So each Haenyeo community is attached to a specific fishing village, and they have to live in that coastal community, that coastal fishing village. So we went and we spent time with these women, and basically we just, took them out for coffee or came to their communal areas, and we just asked them questions and let them talk about their lives and let them talk
Mhm.
about the things that they might want to talk about if there were to be a documentary about them. And so I think going there so consistently, spending time with them, and really letting them drive the conversation and drive the kind of narrative themes of the film, it really allowed them to trust us that we weren't going to force a specific narrative on them, but we were going to let them tell their own story in their own words.
Mhm. When I was watching your film, I was kind of thinking that in the modern world, tradition becomes less and less important. And however, these women, they really care about it. They really care about this job. And I also know it's a very crucial job here, also from the economical standpoint. But I wanted to ask you, why do you believe there is such a sentiment towards, maintaining this independence and determination? What is the source of it for you after
Mm.
speaking to them? What are your afterthoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the notion of preserving tradition in a modern world was kind of one of the central themes of this film. And it was also one of the reasons I wanted to make this film is I didn't know what the answer to that was. Like, how do you honor and preserve your ancient traditions while at the same time embracing the modern world that you live in? And I think for the Henyo, especially the ones that were in our film, it's deeply important to them that they preserve this culture because this is a culture that was passed down heritage and lineage wise through their mothers and grandmothers. So it's something that became sort of a family tradition, but also it historically has played such an important role in the lives of Korean women on this island. So being a Haenyeo was a deep source of pride, but it also gave them financial independence at a time when very few women anywhere had financial independence. I mean, we're talking about the 17th century. It's like when really the first Haenyeo culture was documented. So this tradition, it actually allowed the women of this island to experience financial independence. It allowed them to care for their families. They became the breadwinners of their families. It gave them an identity, it gave them pride, it gave them agency. And I think that's also why they cherish it so much. It's not just a job. And as one of our Haenyeo says in the beginning of the film, it's a calling. And the other component to this is not just what benefits that this culture and tradition has given the Haenyeo, but it's also what the Haenyeo provide to the world through this occupation and this tradition. They are the guardians of the ocean, and they call themselves that. They're the ones that are protecting the ocean. They're cleaning up the ocean floor when they're harvesting marine life. They're the ones that are speaking out on behalf of what is happening to the ocean right now because of climate change and global warming and pollution, and now this radioactive wastewater. So this tradition is deeply important to carry on because who else is going to be so intimately familiar with the health of the ocean in the same way that the Haenyeo are? So it goes both ways. It's a tradition that's deeply important because of what it has provided to Korean women of this island for centuries, but also what those women have been able to do in terms of preserving the ocean and acting as conservationists on behalf of the ocean.
When you were shooting, were there any remarkable situations or accidents that maybe left some sort of like lasting impression on you? Because you mentioned that you respected them deeply back then, but maybe there was something that made you admire this culture even more?
I mean, it's just the sheer labor of what they do is pretty incredible. We had a subject that was 90 years old. She's a 90-year-old Haenyeo, and she still dives almost every day. And she goes out into the ocean and she comes back 4 hours later with like a net full of sea urchin and conch. And I don't think I could even be in the ocean for 20 minutes without going back to shore and needing a break. So the idea that these women, they're all in their 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes 90s, that they can work for 4 to 6 hours in the ocean easily, that every day I saw that, I was sort of flabbergasted, and I couldn't believe the athleticism that was shown by these elderly women because we don't usually associate like sheer athleticism and endurance with elderly women, but these women, I mean, they could out survive they could out survive me and the crew. I mean, honestly. So pretty much every day we would all be in shock at what we were witnessing.
Thank you for today, and thank you for choosing this important topic. All the
Thank
best. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. This is great talking to you.